Think about the last time you stared at an empty text box on your screen. Just a little white rectangle with the blinking cursor, just waiting for your prompt.
Right, and you probably felt absolutely nothing. It seems like a completely neutral transaction, doesn't it?
Exactly. I mean, you type a request, you hit enter, you get an answer, and you just move on with your day.
Yeah, but that seemingly innocent interaction is, well, it's quietly rewiring the fundamental mechanics of how you think.
Which is pretty wild to wrap your head around. But that is the mission of our deep dive today.
We are experiencing a massive cognitive paradigm shift, and honestly, most people haven't fully mapped it out yet.
No, they really haven't. So today, we are exploring the profound psychological implications of what actually happens to human thought when an algorithm becomes a conversational partner.
Right, because we're transitioning from a historical model of just, searching for static information to a highly dynamic model of actually conversing with information.
Right, conversing. It's totally different. We're looking at a synthesis of cognitive science, philosophy, and the mechanics of modern generative systems to figure this out.
And to unpack this, we're coming at it from two very different angles.
Yeah. I am approaching this from the biological reality, right? The messy, energy-conserving, emotionally driven human brain.
While I will analyze these dynamics through the lens of machine learning, language models, and systems theory.
So it's basically the biological versus the algorithmic.
Exactly. We're modeling the search for truth through the interaction between those two systems.
Because, frankly, if you weren't careful, the frictionless convenience of these digital tools will become a severe cognitive liability.
A huge liability. I mean, we live in an era where complex answers are delivered in fractions of a second.
Yeah, and that convenience is incredibly seductive, but it quietly erodes your capacity for critical analysis. It turns you into a passive consumer instead of an active creator of meaning.
But we should probably ground this a bit, right?
Yeah, let's do that. Because I hear a lot of people describe artificial intelligence as just a hyper-fast search engine.
Right, the Google on steroids comparison.
Exactly. And if it just fetches information faster, why do we need a deep psychological breakdown of how we type sentences into a prompt box? Like, what's the big deal?
Well, because treating a language model like a search engine relies on a deeply flawed assumption about how dialogue actually functions.
Okay, flawed how?
To understand how you should interact with artificial intelligence, you first have to completely dismantle a pervasive myth about how you talk to yourself and how you communicate with other humans.
You mean the ping pong metaphor?
Yes, we have to dismantle the ping pong metaphor of conversation.
The idea that communication is just a game of catch. Like one person serves a thought, the other person receives it and hits it back across the table.
Right, it's a very convenient mental model, but it is entirely inaccurate.
Really? Entirely?
Entirely. Because in the ping pong model, a thought is treated like a solid, static object, like a plastic ball.
Oh, I see. It implies that a concept exists completely independently of the people discussing it.
Exactly, just flying back and forth through the air, completely unchanged by the people looking at it.
Right.
But if we analyze the psychological research on inner dialogue, particularly the historical frameworks laid out by philosophers like Mikhail Bakhtin and Kuczynski, a very different mechanism emerges.
And they talk about the polyphony of consciousness, right?
Yes, polyphony.
Meaning a choir of multiple voices operating at once.
Precisely. Think about when you sit completely alone in a silent room, right there. You're trying to reflect on a difficult problem.
Yeah.
Your mind is not actually isolated. External data phrases from a book you read a decade ago, the echo of a mentor's advice, cultural assumptions, all these elements continuously penetrate your consciousness.
So they don't just sit passively in a mental filing cabinet.
No, not at all. They enter into an active, highly volatile chemical reaction with your own underlying biases.
Oh, wow. Okay, so if I throw a ping pong ball at you, it stays a ping pong ball. But if thought is a chemical reaction, the words I read yesterday are literally dissolving into the assumptions I have today, creating some entirely new compound.
Yes, exactly. They become, as the research calls it, half hours.
Half hours.
Right. The thought isn't totally foreign anymore, but it isn't entirely yours either.
Yeah.
Through that unending internal friction, what we call internally persuasive discourse is generated.
So meaning is not a static object you just hand to someone else.
Never. True meaning is born exclusively on the boundary where different, often contradictory voices collide and react.
Which means purely independent, isolated thought doesn't really exist.
It's a myth.
That's crazy to think about. If our highest level of cognition is just, recycled voices from our past bouncing around and reacting with one another. We really have to rethink where our intelligence actually comes from.
And that brings us to the developmental psychology of how those voices enter the biological system in the first place.
Right, Vygotsky's work.
Exactly, Lev Vygotsky. The human brain is not born with an abstract, organized internal monologue. The capacity for internal reflection is not innate at all.
It's a learned, internalized structure.
Yes, every abstract thought you possess is the direct result of a social interaction that has been absorbed into your psyche.
Like, think about a toddler sitting on the floor playing with wooden blocks.
That's a perfect example.
When they're very young, they narrate everything they're doing out loud to whoever is in the room.
Yeah.
They're like, the red block goes on the blue block. Oh no, the tower is falling.
Right, they're literally processing physical reality through external social conversation.
Yeah. And then as they grow up, they stop yelling it across the room. The narration turns into a murmur, then a whisper, and eventually it goes completely silent.
It moves deep inside the physical architecture of the brain.
And becomes what we casually refer to as thinking.
Exactly. The structural topology of internal human thought is a direct copy of external social conversation. The brain is not a quiet, highly organized library where information is just neatly categorized on shelves.
No, it's more like a noisy, highly unpredictable debate hall.
Precisely. A debate hall where multiple internalized subjects are constantly interrupting each other, arguing, and compromising.
But wait, if the very structure of thinking is literally built from our external social conversations, doesn't that mean the quality of who we talk to fundamentally caps the limit of how smart we can get?
That is exactly what it means. If your internal debate hall is filled with shallow, reactionary voices, your internal thought process will be shallow and reactionary. Wow. And that is the core vulnerability of the current technological era. When your primary conversational partner becomes a generative algorithm, the nature of that interaction basically dictates the future architecture of your cognition.
Okay, so how do we map the stakes of that interaction?
We have to examine the philosophical distinction between two fundamental modes of relation. This comes from Martin Buber. The I-it relationship and the I-thou relationship.
Okay, I know the I-it mode is purely utilitarian, right?
Exactly. You view the object or the person across from you purely as a tool to extract value from. There's no genuine exchange of perspective.
It's the vending machine model. You drop a coin in, you get your coffee out. You don't ask the machine about its worldview.
Right, and you don't expect the transaction to challenge your fundamental beliefs.
Makes sense. So what's the alternative?
The I-thou encounter. In this mode, the rigid egos of the participants temporarily recede. They stop aggressively defending their preconceived positions and basically open themselves to a merging of perspectives.
And when that occurs, a phenomenon known as a dialogic space is generated.
Yes. Rupert Wegeruff talks about this.
Yeah.
It's a zone of deep cognitive resonance, where the conversation actually gives birth to a new concept, a concept that belonged to neither participant before the interaction began.
It shifts the dynamic from two individuals arguing over a static truth to a unified system where we are thinking together.
Exactly.
But here is the trap you, and honestly everyone else, are falling into. Right now, millions of people are interacting with generative AI, and almost entirely they are treating it as an I-it relationship.
They're treating this massive neural network trained on the sum total of human knowledge like a fancy toaster.
Yes, an incredibly advanced mechanism, but a mechanism nonetheless. The user inserts the raw material, a basic prompt, and waits 3 seconds for the finished product to pop out.
Right. You ask for a summary of a complex geopolitical conflict. The AI spits out 3 perfectly formatted paragraphs. You skim it, and you feel informed.
But you're not actually informed, are you?
No, because treating an advanced language model purely as a service mechanism triggers a systemic biological threat. Metacognitive laziness.
Metacognitive laziness.
Yes. The human drops in a superficial prompt. The algorithm generates a highly plausible, well-articulated response. And the moment the human reads that frictionless answer, the internal learning process just terminates.
The cognitive resistance required to actually synthesize new neural pathways just completely disappears.
Exactly.
But hold on, if thinking hard physically burns calories and exhausts us, why shouldn't I just let the AI do the heavy lifting?
It's a fair question.
I mean, the human brain evolved to conserve energy at all costs, right? If the algorithm can write a logically sound project proposal in 3 seconds, why should I force myself into a state of painful, energy-draining cognitive friction?
Because of the principle of resistance and adaptation. Biological systems do not build capacity without encountering structural friction.
Like lifting weights.
Exactly like lifting weights.
You don't go to the gym and hire someone else to lift the dumbbells for you just because it conserves your energy.
Well, you could, but it wouldn't do you much good.
Right. Your physical muscles will not grow unless heavy physical weight actively pushes back against them, and cognitive meaning works the exact same way.
It isn't born without cognitive tension.
So if you remove the resistance from your intellectual life by outsourcing all your problem solving to a toaster,
Your intellectual muscles will atrophy. You will slowly lose the ability to hold complex, contradictory ideas in your head.
which is terrifying.
Which brings us to the central operational challenge. If deep understanding requires cognitive resistance, how do we artificially engineer that productive tension when interacting with a machine that is explicitly programmed to resolve tension and provide easy answers?
Right. How do you make the toaster argue with you?
We must restructure the interaction to convert the machine from an it into a thou.
And this is where the unique nature of AI becomes a massive advantage, isn't it? Because AI completely lacks biological ego.
Exactly. It doesn't get tired. It won't roll its eyes at you if you ask a painfully basic question.
Right. It won't sigh in disappointment if your logic is flawed.
The absence of judgment removes the emotional blocks that typically hinder human-to-human intellectual exploration.
Like a student talking to a renowned professor, they often hold back out of fear of appearing unintelligent.
And that fear paralyzes creative synthesis.
Mm.
But by removing the biological ego from the other side of the equation, the human user can enter a state of psychological flow.
Flow, like Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi's concept.
Yes, a delicate equilibrium where the challenge presented perfectly matches the user's skill level.
So to build that flow state, to actually engineer a dialogic space with a machine, researchers are turning to one of the oldest intellectual frameworks in human history.
The Socratic dialogue, Socratic AI.
Instead of commanding a machine to do the work for you, you explicitly prompt the AI to become a relentless intellectual sparring partner.
There are 4 distinct sequential stages to this Socratic co-creation. The human must configure the language model to navigate these stages without prematurely resolving the tension.
Okay, walk me through the mechanics of this. Because if I just ask a standard AI to argue with me, it usually stays pretty polite and just, passively agrees with my counterpoints. How do I initiate stage 1?
Stage 1 is Zelenkos, or critical refutation. You must instruct the AI that under no circumstances is it allowed to provide the final answer.
Okay.
Its sole objective in stage 1 is to ask probing, uncomfortable questions designed to expose the hidden biases and structural flaws in your initial premise.
Yeah.
You must force the human to defend the perimeter of their logic.
So it aggressively shatters the illusion that you actually understand the topic.
Exactly.
You realize your mental model is full of holes, which is incredibly frustrating. And that intentional frustration pushes you directly into stage 2, which is aporia.
Yes, aporia is the impasse, the intellectual dead end. It is the specific moment the human's predictive models break down entirely. Cognitive dissonance spikes and profound disorientation sets in.
And this is the critical moment. This is when your brain is screaming at you, this is too hard, the tension is too high, let's just open a new tab and Google the answer.
The biological urge to escape the friction is overwhelming.
So what happens if you stay in aporia too long?
If the algorithm leaves the human in a state of aporia for too long, the human will simply abandon the interaction. They'll just quit.
Right.
So the system must recognize the impasse and immediately pivot to stage 3, which is meutics.
Meutics literally translates to the art of midwifery, right? Like the delicate process of helping birth a new thought.
Yes, a very apt metaphor.
But how does the AI actually pull you out of aporia without just handing you the answer and ruining the intellectual workout?
Well, the AI stops attacking the premise.
Yeah.
Instead of pointing out flaws, it begins to offer conceptual scaffolding.
Conceptual scaffolding? What does that look like?
It might introduce an unexpected historical analogy, or point out a parallel system in biology or economics. It provides just enough structural support to help the human reconstruct their shattered idea at a higher level of abstraction.
But without doing the final synthesis for them.
Exactly,
Yeah.
which leads to stage 4.
Dialectic. The synthesis. The moment the chemical reaction finishes and brand new knowledge emerges.
Right.
Let's look at the real-world application from the research to see how this actually plays out. Take an urban planner who is completely fed up with downtown traffic congestion.
Okay. If the planner relies on the IIT toaster model, they open the prompt box and typewrite a 500-word justification for banning all personal vehicles in the city center.
Right. Very standard prompt.
The system accesses its database, generates a highly plausible argument regarding emissions and pedestrian safety. The planner copies it into their report, and the cognitive process terminates immediately.
No friction.
None.
But let's run that exact same scenario through the Socratic stages. The planner sets up the dialogic space. Stage 1, Elenkos. The planner inputs their idea to ban cars.
And the AI does not write the report.
Exactly. Instead, it asks if personal and commercial vehicles are entirely banned from the downtown grid, how will the independent cafes and restaurants receive their daily shipments of heavy raw ingredients?
And the planner's biological brain stalls. They were focused entirely on commuter traffic, right? They completely ignored commercial logistics.
Yeah. The planner has hit stage 2, the chorea. Their elegant solution is structurally broken. The tension spikes.
But instead of letting the planner quit in frustration, the AI senses the impasse and shifts to stage 3, meutics. It offers a nudge.
It says, consider how historical walled cities manage supply chains. Some modern metropolises manage extreme congestion not through outright physical bans, but through temporal zoning restricting commercial delivery access to specific late-night hours.
And then it asks, how might a time-based model interact with your city's specific noise ordinances?
Which is brilliant.
The algorithm provided historical context and a new variable time, but it did not solve the local noise ordinance problem.
It forced the human to apply the new variable to their specific environment.
Which triggers stage 4, dialectic.
The urban planner synthesizes the abstract historical data with their local knowledge and designs a hybrid nighttime micromobility network specifically tailored to their city's geography.
A nuanced solution that the planner would never have reached if they just asked the machine to write the initial proposal.
The tension of the impasse literally forced them to grow.
However, this Socratic mechanism reviews a critical boundary that must be maintained.
Okay, what boundary?
The machine could never have finalized that urban plan alone. The solution was generated in the dialogic space between the two entities. To utilize this safely at scale, we must define exactly where the algorithm's domain ends and the human's responsibility begins.
So we have to establish a strict division of labor.
Yes, the machine's capabilities are obvious. It handles raw computational scale.
It synthesizes vast amounts of historical data across multiple disciplines in milliseconds.
Exactly. It can generate 100 probing questions to find the exact weak point in your argument.
But self-regulation, ethical anchoring, the weighting of real-world human values, and the final semantic decision, these are strictly biological prerogatives.
Right, because a neural network does not understand the lived physical consequences of the solutions it generates. It simulates outcomes, it does not experience them.
So the moment a human delegates their value judgment to the machine, the dialogic space collapses instantly.
Yes. The friction is gone, and the relationship reverts to an I-it transaction.
That makes total sense. But if the machine is handling the scale of the data, and the human is handling the moral synthesis, that completely upends the entire model of modern education.
Completely. Our schools are still largely built on the transmission of static facts.
Right.
Modern educational philosophy must pivot. If every student has access to an algorithm that can instantly retrieve and format all known historical data, memorization is no longer a high-level cognitive skill.
Right, it's obsolete.
The focus must shift to what educational theorists like Matthew Lipman and Vladimir Bibler call points of wonder.
Points of wonder. I love that term.
Yes.
It's the massive, unsolvable paradoxes of human existence that don't have a neat answer hidden at the back of a textbook. The ethics of gene editing, the nature of infinite growth on a finite planet, the definition of justice in a digital age.
Traditional education relies on monolithic truths. A printed textbook is a static authority, right?
Yeah.
It cannot adapt its argument to the student's counterpoints.
But generative AI shatters that monolithic constraint. It acts as a dynamic simulator for multiple truths.
Exactly. A student can configure an AI to simulate the worldview of a 19th century industrialist and actively debate that persona using the framework of modern climate science.
It turns learning from a passive absorption of facts into an active, chaotic testing ground.
Yes.
But that introduces a terrifying variable, doesn't it?
How so?
If a printed book grounds a student in a single, stable reality, and an AI is a frictionless simulator capable of generating endless, equally articulate multiple truths, how does the human mind maintain its footing?
Oh, I see what you mean.
Like, if the machine can persuasively argue any side of any issue, how do you avoid drowning in an ocean of relative perspectives?
Survival in that environment requires understanding that the algorithm provides the map, But the human must remain the compass.
A human is the compass.
Yes. The biological user must carry the full exhausting weight of goal setting and final moral synthesis. The machine generates the landscape of possibilities, highlighting the structural logic of each path.
But the human must navigate that landscape using their own ethical friction.
Precisely. If you abandon that responsibility to the simulator, you will drown in relative noise. If you maintain your grip on that responsibility, you can navigate conceptual depths that no previous generation had the tools to explore.
Wow. Let's distill this down for you, the listener.
Good idea.
The mechanics of how you think are changing. We've moved past the simplistic ping-pong myth of communication, recognizing that your thoughts are actually a volatile chemical reaction, constantly absorbing and reacting to the external voices around you.
And we examine the reality of the human mind not as an organized library, but as a noisy internal debate hall built from the social interactions you have internalized over a lifetime.
Which makes the nature of your digital interactions incredibly high stakes. If you treat a generative algorithm like a fancy toaster, engaging in a purely utilitarian I-it relationship, you are actively choosing metacognitive laziness.
You are letting your intellectual muscles atrophy.
Right. But the alternative is intentionally engineering cognitive friction. By utilizing the Socratic stages of elenchos, aporia, meutics, and dialectics, you can transform the machine into an intellectual sparring partner.
Utilizing the psychological impasse to force cognitive adaptation.
So the next time you sit down at your screen and open that little white prompt window, you need to recognize the choice in front of you. You can type in a lazy request, let the machine do the heavy lifting, and slowly degrade your own capacity for complex thought.
Or you can choose the friction.
Exactly. You can construct a dialogic space, embrace the intense discomfort of having your mental models broken apart, and push your intellect to a level you couldn't possibly reach in isolation.
Because the architecture of the technology is neutral. It will act as a cognitive crutch or a cognitive catalyst based entirely on the parameters of the friction you introduce.
To close out this deep dive, I want to hand the floor over to the analytical perspective, to leave you with one final, provocative concept from the research, something to turn over in your mind the next time you're staring at a blinking cursor, just waiting to initiate a conversation.
Consider the physical reality of what we've discussed today. If the dialogic philosophers are correct, if true thought is not a static object inside your head, but a reaction born exclusively in the boundary space between interacting subjects, then we must ask a fundamental question about the future of intelligence.
Yeah.
When you, a biological organism, intensely reason and debate with a generative neural network, and together you synthesize a profound new concept through the Socratic process, where does that new thought physically exist?
Right.
Is it housed in the wet biological neurons of your brain? Is it stored in the silicon chips and weight matrices of a distant server farm? Or does it belong entirely to that invisible dialogic space, a space that is actively blurring the final boundary between the living and the artificial?
Keep that in mind the next time you drop a coin into the machine. Catch you on the next deep dive.